What if the most qualified person in the room doesn't have a degree? And what if leadership isn't about credentials, but about clarity, consistency, and grit? Well, today we're joined by Cliff Russell, an operations leader with over 27 years of experience, a track record of turning chaos into clarity, and a voice that challenges conventional thinking. In this episode, Cliff shares how he's building on a strong fiscal year, why processes are the unsung heroes of accountability, and how he's navigated a career where experience didn't always get the recognition that it deserved. This is an episode about doing the work, earning respect, and redefining what qualifies someone to lead. So let's get into it. So we want to welcome back to the studio Cliff. Cliff's becoming a regular here at the sterilization station, which Bill Rochelle loves. And so, Cliff, I'm glad you're able to come back here for this very, very, very great conversation we're about to have today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. It's always great to sit down and have a conversation with you, Bill. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you're here again, and we're gonna just jump right into it. We got some great questions. I feel are gonna really empower the listeners, and that's what this sterilization station and empowerment podcast for sterile processing is all about. So, in segment one, we're going to talk about building momentum after a big year. So, you just wrapped up the fiscal year. So, what's your mindset right now? A reflective or already locked in on what's next?
Well, we have probably maybe about 10 seconds of reflection, and then it's on, the new fiscal year's here, so we're ready to go. But no, it's always good to reflect, to look over your wins. That builds your confidence. Hey, we did this right. We did this right. And then you can look at how we can do things better moving forward. The great thing about this job is like every customer is a little bit different, but you can build on each experience. Like, hey, this worked for this customer. I wonder if it might work here, right? So bringing those, problem solving skills to the table. I love the industry just because of that, but definitely, always looking forward because you want to, always trying to stay ahead of that curve, especially being in sales and being a vendor. We definitely want to build our business and increase our business. But at the same time, what's unique about, Steris is that there's always a lot of talk, and it's the first talk that happens is how can we bring value? How can we bring something that our customer really needs and wants, so that not only will they use us now, but they'll continue to use us. So yeah, I love that thought process, and you don't see it a lot with some of the bigger companies, but I really feel that at least in our division, that's the first forethought is, yeah, we want to build a business, that's our job, but how can we do that in a manner that's going to bring a lot of value, right? Because then you're going to keep us around. We're not just going to be just some other vendor, right?
No, it's actually really good. And then just even thinking about within your role, sometimes you are able to acquire new accounts, and when you get those new accounts, you're gearing up, to create an action plan to attack a new account or to get some leverage. And so what are some non-negotiables in your planning process when you're onboarding new clients?
Well, and this is something we get pushback on sometimes because a lot of the customers aren't used to it. Because I mean, a lot of people might walk in your door and say, "Hey, I'll save you 20%," right? But 20% off what? If you don't know what you're spending, if you don't know what you have. So one of the biggest non-negotiable things that we have to ask for is data. And we're not talking about how much you spend with so-and-so. We're talking about, a lot of times I talk about, servicing the fleet of trays. So how much service are you currently getting? Is that enough to cover your trays? Is that based on usage? So that data is what really helps us hone in and tailor the service program to each account. Because everybody's different. Everybody, you might go to one place that they're really heavy in ortho and spine. Other places heavy in something else. So you've got to tailor that based on the usage, of course, because that's what our governing bodies are asking for. How do you base this on usage, and how do you sustain it? And then how do you wrap education around it, right? So those are the three questions that we are told by our customers that the surveyors are asking. And so that's where we're trying to bring that value. And so we try to dial it in as close as possible to make it as accurate as possible. Because with any type of analysis, good information in is going to be good information out, right? But if you put trash in, you're going to get trash out. So we try to just, that's a non-negotiable, is some of the data that we have to tell you that, hey, this is where you're at, this is where you're talking about wanting to be, and how do we get there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And just, in case you were curious, this episode is called Beyond the Degree with Russell on strategy, grit, and the power of process. So, I just want to kind of set the tone a little bit to this conversation and share a little bit. This is not really a part of the script, but just I feel led to kind of add this into this. So, I was working and I've been in sterile processing for 20 years. I was working at Kaiser Permanente for 15 years and I kept running. I was able to, I started as a Tech 2. Now, Kaiser doesn't go Tech 3, Tech 4, Tech 5 like UCSF other facilities might, which is not really the best thing because it is good to have a growth plan and growth structure. And that's something that I know me and Hank Falk, we talked about recently on my burnout conversation was just about the difference between growth and certifications and how, some people get caught up on certifications, and then they kind of feel like they've maxed out, they've got the golden crown, and now they're kind of stuck with no opportunities. And so I'm sharing a little bit of my story as well before I go into this next segment because I know it's you know I feel it's going to help the conversation to have more context. Is that I remember becoming a lead tech at Kaiser and then applying for supervisor positions and running into this this door, right, where you don't have a bachelor's degree, you don't have a 4-year degree, you don't have a this degree, that degree. And so I ended up transitioning away, and that's when I met Cliff. I went to Sterile IMS, and eventually I was offered a manager's position in single-use sterilization, which was in a contract plant in Fremont called Steritech. We did electron beam and X-ray sterilization, and then I was able to get that manager's experience, which allowed me when I came back, I was able to secure my role now in a leadership role. And so, moving into segment 2 here, and this episode is a little different. We're not talking about cycles. We're kind of getting more into something that's really kind of hitting something that I think will really add value. But we're moving into the degree dilemma, right? So you're talking about like the credentials versus experience, the hiring biases, career resilience. And so you've got nearly 3 decades of experience, yet you said not having a traditional 4-year degree can be a major obstacle. Can you take us into that experience a bit more?
Well, just, a lot of times now, especially, going through recruiters and things like that, a lot of it is set up that when you do the little questionnaires, if certain boxes aren't checked off, you're automatically like kicked out of the queue, so to speak, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
it's not even a matter of like, oh, somebody, it's a personal preference. It's a lot of times it comes through HR and how they set up the job description and all that good stuff. But again, I do think that they need to be looked at. I think it should be because, first of all, let me say that I back going to college, getting some kind of education. My education came from 2 years of traditional college, then I went to 2 years of scrub tech school. So I have 4 years, but not 4 years traditional, and I don't have a bachelor's. Now, two out of my three daughters, they're in college now. Actually, one just graduated with her 4-year degree and get ready to go to graduate school. So I 100% back it and think that it's important. I don't want anybody to think that it's not important. But when it comes to hiring, something that I would recommend to companies would maybe look at it like a and or type situation. Because I mean, I've applied for jobs that a couple of them I felt like I was overqualified for, and didn't get them just because of that reason. Which I get. That's the when businesses set those things in place, that they're for a reason, and I get that, and I do think they need to be looked at and maybe tweaked and changed. However, let's talk on the empowering side. Are we going to sit here and be the victim and go, "Oh, they should change the rule," right? Or can we grab our bootstraps and go, what do I need to do to put myself in a better position? For myself, my example, I mean, when I got out of school, I thought I'd be scrubbing the rest of my life, right? But life takes turns, and I ended up coming to the sales side. So my plan is I'm going to go and because like I said, I have 2 years of traditional college, so I'm going to look at what it's going to take to finish that out. So I can add that to my resume, because one, it would be a proud moment for me, but two, at the same time, I'm not going to sit back and wait for the rules to change because I may not like that particular rule, right? You don't want to take the victim mentality. Does it need to be addressed? Absolutely. Do we need to let it slide? No. But at the same time, it's not going to change overnight, so let's better ourselves in the process. That's kind of my philosophy on it. But I do think that some companies are missing out on some really good, talented people because of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And you kind of went into the next question, and answered it, which was how do you respond internally when you're overlooked, even when you're the most qualified person in the room? And so I think you
It
really,
stings. It stings.
yeah, no, no, for sure. I mean, I've been there, you've been there. And so I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of people that I remember getting ready to go to an interview at a hospital in Sterile, in the Bay Area. And I had my phone interview. I had an interview, like a virtual panel interview. And I was getting ready for the in-person interview, super excited. I'm like, I'm going to get my job, right? Educator. It was like educator. And I'm in downstairs. We were purchasing a home, so we were living with our friends, and I'm in their basement putting the tie on, Cliff, right? I mean, I'm putting the tie on, right? Pushes it up, the phone rings. Hey, Bill, it's the director of the yada yada yada. Okay, hey, what's going on? How you doing? Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's good, Bill. We just want to ask you a quick question. I said, sure. Do you have certified healthcare leadership certification through HSPA? Do you have the CHL? I said, no, I don't have it, but it was recommended on the application, but it didn't necessarily say required, right? Oh, okay. Well, let me call HR, right? So I slowly started taking the tie off. They
Yeah,
called back five
it can
minutes
be
later, like,
frustrating for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. But and that's what I like what you said was, instead of kind of the woe is me, but like, how do I empower myself to make the next steps? And so I think when you answered the way you answered it was really, really good, because it's all about empowerment, and it's all about maybe this was a depth gauge to let me know where I'm at, but I know that I can still get there. And so
Well, and exactly, some of those things like that happen. It does let you kind of self-evaluate and say, hey, okay, what do I need to work on? But the last thing anybody, you don't want to turn that, because it's a rejection, you don't want to turn that into excuses. Oh, I didn't get it because of this. I didn't get, because I feel that we have so much opportunity, here in America, in our lives, that you can turn anything that's a negative into a positive, right? And so instead of sitting back and going, oh, they should change the rules, which they should maybe, right? But at the same time, that's not helping you right now. So what can we do to move forward and better ourselves? And the ego side of that, when you do that and you go and get your 4 year degree and finish, then you can be like, hey, I did it. Don't you can't deal with me now, right? I earned it. So
yeah,
again,
that's good.
I like having that move forward mentality, that hey, some of this is due to the fact that I don't have it. So what can I do to get it, right? So
Right. And I think that's really good. And you're kind of already touching on, the next question, which would be like, what advice would you give other experienced professionals who feel, kind of boxed out by the degree requirements? But I think what you're saying is that there's things you can do to start to make those steps, right? You did a two-year
you
AS
got to put in
degree.
the work. You got to put in the
Yeah.
work. Like I work with everything from middle school up to high school level kids. I coach football and different sports, and I had a kid come up to me, and some of the high school kids are thinking about what they're going to do with their life, right? And one came up to me and was like, "Hey, what about being a consultant?" And I was like, "What are you going to consult on?" I was like, you don't even know anything yet. You're just coming out of high school. You gotta build that experience. You gotta spend time in a field before you would call yourself an expert. So, in saying that, do the work. It's the journey, and I hate to sound cliche, but it's the journey. If you don't spend that time and learn it, just like you spent time in the department, right? That's how you learned how to be a
Yeah.
good leader, because whatever people around you did well or didn't do well, you learned from it, right? So, my best recommendation is continue to work and continue to learn and know your stuff. Know it. Don't just guess at it and this, that, and other. Keep up with it, because when you can, it's nothing better than knowing what the guidelines are before they're taught to you, right?
Right, right.
So again, that's what I would recommend is do the work. Don't look at it as work. Look at it as that journey that, hey, I'm trying to get here. And you may want to be hospital administration, but if you spend these years here and learning how the inner workings of the hospital works, that's going to make you a much better C-suite person when you get there, right? So again, that's my kind of mentality and how I think, but that's what I would recommend to anybody.
No, I think that's really good. That's really great. And then just kind of transitioning into like grit and just even like I know you're really big on process and protocol. And so like what do most teams get wrong when it comes to implementing and maintaining?
you know Details, like I said, we go through a very painful process of getting inventories from our customers and cross-referencing it with what we already have or what's been seen, and we go through a lengthy process to make sure that we get their inventories correct so that we can give them correct pricing, correct cadence of service, that type of stuff. So you know some of the details, because a lot of the times that is a labor of love. A lot of times, the hospital doesn't even know what they have, and they pull out and they got 2,000 trays, but they're averaging 6 or 7 cases a day. Well, what are you using all those trays for? So, and I know Steris has got a really good, Amy Williams does a really good presentation on right sizing your inventory. It's a great presentation, and it really helps open people's eyes of like, hey, why is Doctor So and So have 5 trays, but it only does two surgeries a year here now. Sometimes it might have been, oh, he used to be here every day and he's just scaled back or he retired or whatever it might be. But looking at their inventory on a regular basis like that, it really helps not only with knowing what they have, but like I said before, when those surveyors come in, they ask, "What is your proactive maintenance? How do you sustain it?" And if you've got stuff that hasn't been seen because it's not there and it's on your list and it hasn't been serviced since 2017, they're going to ask questions about that, right? So again, that's the sustainability, and that's what we preach and walk every day in my job. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I love the like the information that you're sharing, the experience where it comes from has always been beneficial. I know that you know out of you've been among some of our top episodes, so that's why I love bringing you back. So
Again, I
definitely,
hope I'm bringing value and stuff that helps. And leaders that are watching this, listen to your vendors when they're coming to you with valuable information, because it might take a sit down meeting of 20 minutes or so, but man, you're going to get so much more insight, as well as helping you reduce damage, reduce complaints, that type of stuff. So, when we come in and want to go over these inventories, it's not just because we want to hear ourselves talk. It's because we're really trying to bring some value.
yeah, that's really good. I know that you talk about competency being key to leadership. So how do you address or develop competency within your teams?
Well, one, your policies and your processes. I mean, leaders, think about it. When's the last time you sat down and went through each step from the time the case ends or breakdown or whenever SPD enters the picture at your facility? What is each step? What is expected? Just like I was telling somebody the other day, just like in SPD, we know our expectations for packing a case cart and how it should be packed and what the OR is expecting, right? When they're going to identify that. Well, the same thing. What's the expectations for it coming back? If right now the expectations are everything comes back in a big metal basin piled on top of each other, that might be an area we could look at for improvement, because that's where a lot of damage comes from, right? And we can look at those touch points and really identify and say, hey, this might be where your damage is coming from, and it could be from the time it's broken down and thrown into a tray to go back to decon, or it could be the storage part. I mean, bipolar forceps. We go through all the time. Their bipolars are skyrocketing because they're getting a lot of repairs. The first thing I do is ask is, how do you store them? Because if they're thrown in in a bin with all the other bipolars and all the other metal ones and with metal forceps, well, that might be where your damage is coming from, right? So again, just working with our customers and trying to pinpoint where some of that problem is. We're not here just to sharpen things. We're here to help you, you know, manage your assets. And I know that's a big word, especially for me, right? Asset management. But you know, it's really just that. And hospitals are going, 90 miles an hour, 24 hours a day. So sometimes that can get away from them. But once a year, get with me, call me up, we'll do it. I've done it with other hospitals where we go through. Now I can't write the process for you. The hospital, your committee has to write that policy, right? But I can come in and help teach it, and we can go through each step and then sign those people off. Now you've got a baseline as a leader on where you're at. Everybody's been trained, everybody knows what's expected. So then when things don't happen, two things: you've got accountability, so you can either go, hey, we need to retrain, or it needs to be a performance review issue, or hey, that person hasn't been trained. Or so you'll see more of a streamline, and it falls right in line with like the lean processes, which I'm sure you're aware of. Trying to streamline as much as possible, because nobody likes to be in decon all gowned up and sweating to death, and then you got to treat each case cart differently because it's packed differently, sprayed differently, separated differently. It's just extra time and extra work that we could shave off, that I know everybody in decon would really love to shave off time. I've worked in decon, so I understand that it's not good. But at the same time, it's not just that. It's protecting those instruments, making sure biofilm's not forming. Biofilm can form within minutes. So if we're not wiping and flushing and spraying in the OR, soaking in sterile water, and then pre-treating that beforehand, sterile processing is fighting an uphill battle. So it's really a team approach. So I didn't mean to go down the rabbit hole there, but there's a lot of moving parts in there.
No, I think that's really good. And then, like, what's the first thing you do when you walk into a department that's clearly just winging it? Like, what does Cliff do? You walk in there and you say, like, oh my goodness, what's going on here?
Well, things, at times I thought things were, hey, why in the world? But then there's some explanation. So what I usually do is I try to sit down with the leadership and the lead techs and get their feedback. I'm not, who am I to come in and tell you what's wrong with your department, right? So, hey, let's start. I can tell you where you could move to best practices, but that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. You're just not doing it at best practice. I mean, right now,
Right.
a wet towel on your instruments is still acceptable, right? It's just not best practice. So again, I don't go in with a right or wrong type mentality. It's more of less instead of, you know, I forget where I got this, but instead of throwing spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, let's sit down and have a conversation and see what keeps you up at night and what complaints you're getting and where your system bottlenecks, right? So then we got places to focus, and then I can make recommendations from there, because I want to earn the right to come in and help and tell you where we can make improvements. When I first walk in the door, I haven't earned that right yet. So it's about sitting down with you and going, hey, Mr. and Miss Customer, what keeps you up at night? Why am I here? What can I help you with immediately that will take some of that stress, take some of that anxiety away, right? Because, as an SPD leader, man, you get phone calls and people running in your office and emails, and you're like, oh my God, right? So, again, learning how to eat the elephant, one bite at a time instead of trying to force feed it all at once, right?
And I think that's what's really interesting about today's episode is where you're really diving into, you're discussing in reflection about the strategy, about your fiscal year and how to prepare. You're talking about, the opportunity to want to advance. And then you were mentioning about asset management, and it made me think about the second segment we spoke about wanting to improve yourself. And it's interesting because what comes to my mind is that, asset is something that's really valuable, right? So we think about our instruments, we think about the equipment that we have, or you get new equipment and you want to make sure you take care of it. You're trying to manage that asset, and what's so important is how the employees are one of the greatest assets that an organization has. And if we're not preparing, creating opportunities for them to feel valued, or creating opportunities for them to grow, or creating opportunities for them to advance, and understanding, like, how do we create that? And that's what made me want to go back, because of the asset management. And I was just thinking about how the employees are such a great asset in the department, and even our vendors, right? I mean, was speaking to a manager today, and she was asking me about my experience working at Steris, and I was telling her I'm still communicating with Steris. Steris was here. Kevin was at the job drinking coffee, and we were addressing a scope that needed to go out for repair, and creating opportunities for Steris. So I just think it's really important that the employees are one of the greatest assets in the department, and the vendors, like yourself, right? I mean, sometimes you're calling asking me if I'm in today because you want around. And so I just wanted to add that to this conversation, that just appreciating the employees, and sometimes appreciation comes by, are you willing to create growth in the department? Are you willing to sit down with them in those one-on-ones, like the managers, and finding out, like, it's not just, do you have any vacations coming up, or did you put in all your vacation requests? But it's like asking the employees, like, where do you see yourself in a year? Is there anything I can do here to cause you to grow? Some people want to be educators. So, okay, well, let's in a staff meeting, we're having this issue where maybe they're not processing the robotic arms a certain way. Why don't get the IFU and cover that as a topic? So I think it's important to create opportunities for growth. And then some hospitals have educational fund or educational programs that, if your employee wants to get a degree, like, you could begin to facilitate that conversation, get them in
Yeah.
contact with the unions.
Well, going to your episodes on mentorship, that's a great way to be a mentor, is to say, because some people in SPD, they might have got the job because something was open at the time and they've been doing it a couple of years. They may not even know what their path is or what they want their path to be. So you just asking them that question, they're like, "What? I don't know. What do I want to be doing in a year, right?" And then that awareness is there, and then they're like, "Okay, well, what's my options? What could I be doing in a year?" So it really, I think that is a great way to mentor someone, but getting them to ask themselves the question, what do I want to be doing in a year? And then if I figure that out, well, how do I get there, right? So I think I think that's a great question to ask your staff members. Is that, what do you? I mean, do you want to even be here in a year? What do you want to do? And then you can help them get there. Because I mean, as a leader, I love keeping employees. I want to work with the same people, because when the people leave, one, you not only got to train someone new, but you got to learn how to work with someone new. And I love keeping the same team because you tend to mesh together. But I don't want someone to stay if they truly have other aspirations and want to be somewhere else, right? I want the best for them, but at the same time, that's why when you can ask those questions and stuff as they're developing through their career, right? So you can not only plan for that, but you can help them get where they want to go. So I think that's a great way to mentor people as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think that's really true. Mentorship was by far my number one episode. It's still weekly, having at least 100 to 200 views. So it
Good
definitely
deal.
is one of the top things the sterilization station is definitely addressing. And so, really, really appreciate you coming out here today for this episode. Episode was a little bit different, but I do want to say, if you're out there, and you have some employees in your department, if you're in leadership, some call to actions is just look for opportunities to have those one-on-ones, regularly. Find out, checking in with your employees. I know some of the bigger departments, it's harder, but when you make time for those employees and have those one-on-ones, it goes a long way. And someone encouraged me when I first became a manager. They said to make sure that when you schedule that one-on-one, that you try hard as a manager not to cancel that appointment, because it shows that employee that time is really, really important, and listening to them, giving them your 100%, attention, cooperation, participation, and then finding out where they are and then creating opportunities to help them grow. And then if you're an employee in the hospital, is know where you want to be. Have a at least a 3, 6, 9 month plan in the department. Maybe you want to learn some instruments, or maybe you want to take on a responsibility, do a project. Definitely can help you to develop yourself. So are there any encouragement that you might have for anyone out there, Cliff, regarding maybe some of the topics we discussed today?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, use your resources. I know not everywhere, but some of these bigger hospitals and these bigger systems, sometimes if you go back to school to get that degree, they reimburse you, they pay for some of it. Everywhere's different, but you could always check with HR, because I know, going back to school, you're like, oh, the first thing I think of is how, that's one more thing I got to budget in, right? I've got 4 women in my household, so I have to budget well there. But again, looking at your resources, and sometimes you might be able to get a scholarship. You might be able to get some reimbursement with the hospital, especially if you're going and doing something that's related to your it's going to be related to your degree and your career, what you're doing now, and it opens up that path, like you were talking about earlier. Just opens up the path to that. And then the other thing, one of the most successful things I've seen leaders do in sterile processing, because, and Bill, you've known, I'm sure you've experienced it for years, it's the OR and SPD are butting heads. And oh, they do this or they do that, or they're supposed to do this, or we got to get out of that mentality. And I do see more and more of us getting out of that mentality and becoming more of a team approach. But leaders, one thing that if you have that going on between you and the OR, look at cross training. And I don't mean that in a literal sense, but and I know sometimes people laugh at me because they go, do you know how I can work that into my schedule? There's no way that'll happen. But if there's any way you can work it into where a couple of SPD folks go up and watch a surgery and watch what they do and how they're handled, and because I know for a fact, like, most people think there's 1 or 2 trays per procedure, but then you got these spine cases where you've got 20 consignment sets, right? Well, not everything may not make it back into those sets, right? So, seeing the pains of what goes on up there, and then having a scrub tech or 2 every now and again come down and work in decon or work in the prep and pack, so that they get to see what SPD goes through as well. I mean, decon's a great place. I mean, one of the first things I saw in decon, and I make this joke all the time when I'm talking to departments, but I was the ortho scrub tech that everybody hated in SPD, because there's always one, right? I was the guy that, oh, I don't have time to do that. The SPD can do that, right? Well, then I got to work in SPD, and one of the first things I got was femoral reamers that had dried cement on them. Well, that right there taught me why I should wipe it off, while I have it in the OR when it's wet and not attached and not set. Because by the time SPD gets it, you've got to literally jackhammer something to get it off of there, right? So, and that's where damage comes from. That's where, more wear and tear comes from. So those type of things, getting to feel your teammates' pain, that you don't normally get to experience during the day. Because some scrub techs have never dealt with decon. Well, that's the first place I'd put them, right there, right? So they
Oh
can
yeah,
feel that.
for sure. No, and I think Cliff, you gave us some really good information and on what it means to lead with experience, to build with purpose, and to refuse to let the paper trail, define the person. So if you're someone who's ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or under-credentialed, Cliff's story should be a reminder that real leadership comes from doing the hard things consistently and making sure others can do the same. If this episode resonated, take a second to share it with someone climbing the same hill. And remember that degrees can help you open doors, but remember that your effort, your efficiency, it will always help you in the long run as well. So once again, we just want to thank Cliff for coming in. He's always there when Bill says, hey, I got this episode I want to launch, I want to work on, and he's just like, hey, send me the link, let's do it.
I appreciate you having me on, Bill. I really do. I love education, especially in this arena. So, and anybody out there that would like our help, email me, call me, Cliff_Russell at Steris.com. But yeah, reach out, because we love to come in and make patients safer, and that's not just cliche. So thank you again, Bill, for having me on. It's always great to talk to you. I wish I got to see you more, but hopefully that I'll see you next time I'm up in NorCal.
Sounds good, Cliff. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate y'all. Thanks everyone
Thanks,
for
man.
tuning in.